The Curious Mind.
What do you think a high-stakes poker game and a Cold War standoff have in common? Well, the answer lies in this absolutely fascinating field that uncovers the hidden logic behind our decisions. We're talking about game theory, and today we're going to show you how to see the world in a completely new way. I mean, have you ever really thought about it? Why do two giant stags with these massive, potentially lethal antlers usually just lock horns and shove each other around? Or, on a global scale, how did two superpowers with enough nuclear weapons to end the world pull back from the brink? These things aren't just happening by chance. They're the result of a hidden logic, a kind of unwritten set of rules that governs both conflict and cooperation. To really get a handle on this hidden logic, we need to shift our perspective. We have to start thinking of life not as just a series of random events, but as a series of strategic games. And every single one has its own players, its own rules, and its own stakes. Now, at its core, game theory isn't about, chess or Monopoly. It's the science of strategic interdependence. I know, that sounds super academic, but it's actually a really simple idea. It just means that in most situations, your best move depends entirely on what you think the other person is going to do. Think about it. You're driving on the highway, you want to change lanes. Your decision to go or wait depends completely on what you think the driver next to you will do. That's strategic interdependence right there. And there is no better way to understand this whole concept than with the most famous example in all of game theory, the prisoner's dilemma. The setup is a total classic, like right out of a movie. The police have two partners in crime, but they don't have enough evidence for the major charge. So they do the smart thing. They separate them. Different rooms, no way to communicate. And then they offer each of them a deal. A deal designed to test their loyalty, their nerve, and how they think under pressure. Their entire fate now hinges on this one choice. Every game, this one included, has three basic building blocks. You've got the players, in this case, our two prisoners. You've got the strategies, the choices they can make, which are either confess or not confess, and finally, you have the payoffs, the consequences of those choices. And just a heads up for the next slide, the higher the number, the better the outcome.
Okay, now this is where things get really interesting. Let's put ourselves in prisoner one's shoes. You're sitting in that room, you have no idea what your partner's going to do, so you have to think through both possibilities. First, let's say your partner stays quiet. If you also stay quiet, you get a payoff of 1. But if you confess, you get a 3. So confessing is better. Now, what if your partner sings like a canary? Well, if you stay quiet, you get a big fat 0, the worst outcome. But if you also confess, you get a 2. So, in that situation, confessing is still the better option for you.
This is what's called a dominant strategy. No matter what the other player does, confessing gets you a better personal result. So, two perfectly rational people will both confess, and they'll both end up with a payoff of 2. But wait, look at the matrix. If they had both just stayed quiet, they could have each gotten a payoff of 1, which is a better outcome for the group. And that is the heart of the dilemma. Two people making individually logical choices end up with a collectively worse result. So, the prisoner's dilemma shows us how being perfectly rational can sometimes lead to a pretty bad outcome for everyone. But this is not just some theoretical puzzle. It's a really powerful tool for understanding real-world conflict, from business to the battlefield.
You see, this same logic applies pretty much everywhere, from international relations all the way to corporate strategy.
Let's take something called the entry game. Imagine you're a scrappy little startup with an amazing new product. You want to enter a market that's totally dominated by one huge company. Now, you know that if you enter, that big company has two choices. They can either start a brutal price war to crush you, or they can just accommodate you and let you have a little slice of the pie. Your decision to enter or not depends completely on what you think they're going to do. It's a high-stakes game of chicken, and the winner is whoever can think one step ahead. And this logic of strategic thinking doesn't just play out in business. It happens all over the animal kingdom. Biologists found they can model animal conflict using two basic strategies, the hawk and the dove. The hawk is the aggressor. It always fights, always escalates. The dove, on the other hand, is a pacifist. It prefers to just posture and display rather than risk getting hurt. Now, in a world full of doves, a single hawk can just come in and take over. But in a world of all hawks, everyone's just getting injured all the time. The stable result, it turns out, is often a mix of both strategies, and that's why so many animal conflicts are more like ritualized dances than bloody fights.
So when does it become rational to actually fight to the death? This quote just nails it. It happens when the future doesn't matter. Think of two honeybee queens fighting to take over a colony. Only one can survive, so for the loser, there is no future. Or think of male fig wasps who will only ever live and mate inside a single fig. In these situations, the stakes are everything. It's all or nothing, and the rational strategy is to fight to the death.
Okay, so we've seen how game theory can explain the, let's call it, the dark side of things. Conflict, competition, self-interest. But what if I told you that the same theory that explains why we fight can also explain why we cooperate? What if the key to understanding altruism and teamwork and trust is actually hidden in the exact same logic that governs war and conflict?
This is the big question, right? If the prisoner's dilemma seems to show that rational self-interest leads to everyone betraying each other, then why do we see cooperation all around us?
The answer lies in one single, really powerful idea: the shadow of the future. You see, in the real world, we don't just play these games once. We play them over and over and over again, usually with the same people. And that changes everything. Suddenly, your reputation matters. Your past actions have real consequences. Just knowing that you'll have to face this person again tomorrow and the day after that casts this long shadow over your decisions today. It forces you to think beyond the short term.
So what's the best strategy in a repeated game? Well, a political scientist named Robert Axelrod ran these big computer tournaments to find out, and a really simple strategy won again and again. It's called tit for tat. First, you're nice, you cooperate on the first move. Then, you're retaliatory, you immediately punish betrayal. But you're also forgiving. As soon as the other player starts cooperating again, you go right back to cooperating too. Simple, but powerful.
So, tit for tat seems like the perfect solution, doesn't it? It's simple, it's effective, it promotes cooperation. But here's the catch. When biologists went looking for real-world examples in the animal kingdom, they found that it was actually incredibly rare. The real world, it turns out, is just a little more complicated than a computer simulation. So if not tit for tat, then what? Well, biologists have found a bunch of other paths to cooperation. One is something called pseudo-reciprocity. This is where an animal helps another, not because it's being nice, but because it's just a byproduct of helping itself. Think of a beaver building a dam. It's creating a pond for itself, but lots of other animals benefit too. Then there are biological markets. In these, cooperation isn't about loyalty at all, it's about finding the best deal. Think of those little cleaner fish on a coral reef. They have lots of different clients, and they'll happily switch to a new one in a heartbeat if it offers a better meal. So we've looked at how game theory can help us understand both conflict and cooperation in our world and in the animal kingdom. But what does all of this add up to? What's the really big picture here? Okay, so the crucial takeaway is this. Game theory is a lens. It's a whole new way to see the underlying logic that connects a huge range of behaviors. It shows us that the choices of a stock trader, a politician, and even a vampire bat sharing food can all be understood through this one single powerful framework of strategic interaction. And that brings us to the final and maybe most important thought. Game theory is not just a tool for understanding the world, it's a tool for changing it. Because once you understand the rules of the game, you can start to think about how to change them. You can start to think about how to create new games with new rules and much better outcomes. So the question isn't just, what games are you playing? The question is, what games do you want to play?
The Curious Mind.